Hey, Bass Geek here, and today I'm going to tell you how I fish the Alabama rig in the fall. There they are. There they are. Oh, I might have two. Oh, look at this. Yeah, double, baby. Yeah. Woo! That video right there is one of the reasons that I love fishing the Alabama rig in the fall. That was about 2 years ago. It was late summer, early fall, right around about this time. You know, when the bass start chasing those schooling shad and you just see these hordes of bass chasing those bait fish, you know, realistically, guys, what looks more like a ball of bait fish than an Alabama rig? Now, I know there's a lot of controversy out there about the Alabama rig. I know a lot of tournaments don't allow you to use an Alabama rig, and some states don't allow you to use, you know, 5 hooks, you know, maybe 3, it may be 2. So make sure before you fish an Alabama rig, you're checking your state's regulations or your tournament series regulations. Now, luckily enough, in Virginia, we're able to fish pretty much as many hooks as we want. So I'm always fishing a 5 hook rig when I'm in Virginia. Now, I live right on the Virginia-Tennessee border. In Tennessee, they only allow 3 hooks, so I have to make some modifications. I'll go over those modifications that I make in just a minute. But the very first thing, let's talk about the gear that you're going to need. So let's talk about the rod and reels that I use first. Now, guys, you know I'm not a fan of the Veritas series by Abu Garcia. Love a lot of Abu Garcia stuff, not a fan of the Veritas series of rods. This is my last one. It's been pretty durable. I've not been afraid to tell everybody that the Veritas rods are real bad about the eyes coming out on the micro guides, and I had bought, I think it was 5 or 6 about 2 years ago. I've actually had this rod for about 3 years now, and yes, even this rod has broke. This is a 7.9 heavy fast action, but it's now only about a, I don't know, 7.6 because the tip broke off of it. So I put another tip on. It still worked great since then. I haven't had any problems with the eyelets on the standard guides. The ceramics in the standard guides have been fine, but I don't even think they make this particular rod anymore. This was made specifically for the Arig. But as far as gear goes, really all you need is anything that's 7.6 or above. I like, you know, 7.6. I really like a 7.11. The longer rod, the better. The longer cast you're going to get, and the more ground you're going to cover. The other thing is, you know, these baits generally are pretty heavy. So, you know, you've got a lot of swim baits, you've got a lot of weights out there. So a little heavier rod, you know, it's a little more like a surf cast. You kind of load it up and get a nice long cast out of it. Now, you know, I fish deeper lakes. If I'm fishing shallower, I may go to a little faster reel, but this is one of the Abu Garcia Ora winches. It is a 5:4 to 1 gear ratio. Now, the reason I throw a 5:4 to 1 is because it's got a lot of torque. One thing, you know, the going trend right now, really, even in flipping and pitching, is to go to a faster reel. Everybody wants a faster reel. Well, one of the things that you lose in a faster reel is you lose power, torquing power, to wrench something up. Guys, these baits and the weight of these baits will really wreak havoc on a higher speed gear ratio. So if I'm fishing these deep to shallow, generally I'm going to go with a lower gear ratio. They just handle it better, and the reel lasts a lot longer. You start throwing these heavy Alabama rigs out there, and you are going to just rip the gears out of a higher speed reel. The line I use is generally a 20-pound fluorocarbon. Now I like fluorocarbon because it's a little more invisible, but I will also use 20-pound monofilament in low vis green most of the time. You can use clear, that's fine. I don't know why, I just have more confidence in the low vis green where I live at. But all that being said, I would highly recommend, if you're really starting to throw these baits, throw it on mono, because it has a little more give, a little more stretch to it, a little more spring. Because by the time you rig all these baits up, you could have somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $25 hanging from your line. So when you make a cast out there and maybe you get a backlash and it just snaps the line off, trust me, having that as a beginner, having that little bit of give in that monofilament will save you a lot of money and save you a lot of baits. And realistically, I haven't seen much of a difference in bite ratio between the two. I like the fluorocarbon because it seems to sink and stay down as the monofilament really wants to float and maybe bring the bait up. Now that's another thing, and it's another reason I like the 5:4 to 1, the slower gear ratio. Guys, you've got a lot of plastic hanging right here, and those tails want to create a lot of lift. So you need to crank that thing slow if you're going to keep it on the bottom in deeper water. But that 5:4 to 1 really helps me keep my bait at the correct depth level I'm targeting. So the knot that I use on both fluoro and monofilament is the improved clinch knot. Just make sure when you're pushing it down that you wet it real well and that you shove it down with your fingers on the fluorocarbon. The very first Alabama rig setup that I use, and I use this pretty much exclusively where I can throw all 5 hooks. And the reason why, as you can see, it's more of a cross setup instead of an X setup. So weighting it with only 3 hooks really becomes a balance issue. Now the titanium rigs by Strike King, what I really like about those is they've got super flexible arms, which give you a lot more action really easily. So you don't have to really pump the rod. All you have to do is maybe a quick turn of the reel handle, and it really causes them to flex together, as you can see, and then they bounce right back apart. So it really gives you this sort of bait fish, extra movement. In clear water, that can really entice bass to bite. Now, you'll notice again, I don't have blades. A lot of Alabama rigs come with blades. I do fish blades, but I only fish blades in a little dirtier water or when there's some heavy chop in clear water, or maybe even some cloud cover. Now the Strike King titanium rig does actually come with a bladed version. And again, the blades generally, I only use those in dirty water, clear water with heavy chop, and some cloud cover. So the other version of Alabama rig or umbrella rig, whatever you want to call it, that I use most often is by Yum. And it is a Yum umbrella rig, or the Flash Mob. Now the Flash Mob comes in a couple of different types. This is the Flash Mob Junior. It's got much smaller blades. I like this during the fall. And then you have the Flash Mob itself, and you can see it has much larger blades on it. These are more rigid. They are more in the, and I can show you here, more in the kind of X, not the cross version. So you've got a balance of really 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom, and then your main bait there in the center. And these are a little better, and I fish these pretty much exclusively on the Tennessee lakes where they only allow 3 hooks. Again, when it comes to the Flash Mob and the Flash Mob Junior, the 2 versions with blades, I'm going to fish them in a little dirtier water, or if I just really want to create more flash, and I try to match the bait fish with the size of blade on the Flash Mob, again with the bigger blades, and the Flash Mob Junior with the smaller blades that the bass are feeding in the area that I'm at. So let's talk about the baits that I generally use. Here lately, I've actually used the 3.3 inch boom shad a lot. I really love this bait. It's got a nice tight wiggle. It looks very good. Now, a lot of people, when they first start fishing an Alabama rig, they want to throw on the Kitech style baits. I'm not a big fan of the Kitech style baits on an Alabama rig, and the reason why I'm not a big fan of them is because they have such a wide tail wobble. If you watch any sort of bait fish, when they're balled up, when they're schooled up, they're very tight. They have very tight action, and I think the boom shad very much, the 3.3 inch very much imitates that. So there's a couple other baits that I use, and the first is the Strike King Swimming Shiner, and the other is the Zoom Swimming Fluke. That's generally the three baits that I'll go to. Colors, I generally stick to shad. If I'm in clear water, I'm going to be fishing my Ghost Shad colors. If I'm in a little dirtier water, it's going to be a straight shad. If I'm around smallmouth, I might throw in something that's got a little bit of chartreuse to it. So now let's talk about the rigging, specifically the hooks. Now, I'm not real big on using any particular jig head. Like I generally won't throw my ledge heads on there simply because they're a little expensive to throw on an Alabama rig. So, you know, just really any good hook jig head will work. Now, again, if I've got all five and I rig them exposed, I'm just going to find a good jig head. Now, the thing about the jig head that you are going to want, you're going to want the hook eye on the top of the head, all right? Generally, I throw with the boom shad about a 4/0 hook. That tends to be about the best size for those 3.3 inch. And you're going to have to be careful when you're casting this around cover because you will get it hung up. The size, I stay a lot to the 1/8 size. It seems to be a good size to fish all throughout the water column. Now, if I want to keep the bait up and maybe move it a little faster, I'm going to go to maybe a lighter weight. So one of the other ways that I rig it that I haven't actually seen a lot of guys rig them is I rig it sort of Texas rig. I rig it on hooks with swim bait hooks with the keeper on them, little spring keeper, and I make sure that I rig it weedless. I love to throw that around a lot of brush. You know, I've got a lot of brush in the lakes that I fish. He'd work around some light grass. Now the hookup ratio is not as good, but when they bite it, you know, you're still going to set the hook in and you're going to get them. The exposed hooks, the hookup ratio is a little better, and this is kind of the controversial side of this bait. When the bass come up, a lot of times on shad, they'll come up beside of them and kind of run through them to try and kill some. Well, with the exposed hooks, when they run through, it's kind of like treble hooks. It's just going to grab onto them. My buddy Mike actually jokes with me and calls this bait the eagle claw of death because he sees it coming back toward his head several times when he's fishing off the back of the boat when I've been fishing this bait. With a Texas rig, you can really throw this bait in areas that you couldn't with the exposed hooks, and a lot of times that'll get you some bigger bites. So what I want to show you is you'll notice the difference, like I was talking about earlier, between the design. This is more of a cross shape, that's more of an X shape. So it's really hard when you can only have 3 hooks to balance this out. You know, you're either going to put one here and one on the left, or you're going to get the bait to run in more like an X, and then you can see there the head's out of whack. I mean, that's not too bad of an ideal. You could put your non-hooks up here, or your baits without the hooks up here, but generally it kind of messes up the movement of this bait. So I just go ahead and set that to the side, and I go ahead and go with a bait that's actually designed with a more X pattern here. So what I generally do is I take the top 2 hooks off. So when I'm over in Tennessee and I'm fishing, what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and take these top 2 hooks off. And if I'm wanting to keep the bait deeper, these are some heads made by Picasso Lures, Picasso Lure Company. This is a 1/8 ounce head. We'll just put that on, and all you do is take whatever bait it is you're going to put on there, and you just thread that up on the screw head. Now I'll put a little bit of super glue on there to get it to hold, but you can see it fits nice, and you know, no hook. But this is the solution I've came up with. If I'm fishing deeper, you know, I still want that weight to keep the Alabama rig down deeper, and Picasso makes some pretty nice hits. Now the other way to do it, you know, if you don't mind the rig coming up a little bit, or you're fishing the rig a little shallower, again, just take that hook off, and I just put the clip back on. And a lot of guys call these hitchhikers. They're just, you know, they're just springs to me. You can do this two different ways. You can come right down here and just thread it on, or you could have just opened up the clasp. And then you just take your bait again, shove that in the middle, and screw it up onto the hitchhiker. And there you have it. You've got a weightless bait at the top of your Alabama rig. So you got the three hooks down here. So hopefully the bass will come along and strike from the bottom, or the back bait from behind. So let's talk about retrieve. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cast it out there. I'm going to let it sink to the bottom. I'm going to watch my line as it's sinking. Once I see that it's no longer taking line, I'm going to start reeling it up. The very first thing I'm going to do when I reel it up, I'm going to give it a nice little sweep. And then I'm just going to start reeling. With the Strike King Titanium, all you really have to do, nice, slow, steady retrieve. Oh, I just got hit. A nice, slow, steady retrieve, and you're just going to give it a quick turn of the handle once in a while. That's going to really cause it to flex. Now the other retrieve, and I like this in shallower water, you can do it in deep water too. Again, I'm going to throw it out there. If I'm fishing it on the bottom, I'm going to let it sink to the bottom. If I'm fishing it high in the water column, I'm just going to engage the reel and start. And what I'm going to do is almost like a Carolina rig. I'm going to sweep it, sweep the rod. So what you end up having is a nice stop and go action, and you know, that will entice the fish. Now third and simplest of all, just a steady retrieve. Just a nice steady retrieve. The difference is, if the fish are deep, I try to count this down to the bottom of the bait fish. So as I'm using my sonar, oh, I got hit again right there. So as I'm using my sonar, I'm just making sure that I know the level the bass are, the level that the bait fish are, and I just try and count this bait down to the bottom of those bait fish. So as it's swimming under the bait fish, this is the first thing that they see coming through. Okay, so storage. Storing these things, if you've got a dedicated Alabama rig rod, can be a pain in the butt. I mean, you stick that in a rod locker and you're gonna have a fun day trying to get it out. So there's a lot of people that make them. The ones I like, they're made by Bass Pro Shops. And again, none of these companies that you see other than Boom Shad I have any affiliation with. It's just what I use. But these things, they're lure wraps, work great. So all you do is you make sure that you wrap it down. I just make sure I put it right around my hooks, and it just velcros together. Now that's the first thing. The next thing that I use, make sure you buy, you know, I use a spinning version, but it's an oversized for the casting rod. It's an oversized you know, rod wrap, whatever you want to call them, you know, rod sock, whatever. But the reason I use a spinning rod version is because as I slide it down, I can kind of push this all together and I can pull it right down over top. So now I've got double protection. I can slide this right in my rod locker and slide it right out whenever I need it. Keeps everything nice, tight, and tucked away. So where do you store your Alabama rigs when they're not tied on to your rod? Okay, the titanium rigs, I suggest they come in this nice little tube. I suggest keeping them in it. You can put them into a plain box or something, a flambeau box, but they just don't cooperate. Keep them in this tube. Keep you one or two on the boat or in your backpack or your tackle box. They do lay down very nicely in the planos. You can close it right up, but I suggest keeping those in the tube. So I know you noticed that it's raining out here today. I left my rain gear at the house like a big dummy, but so my box is a little wet. It's kind of hard to see through. Now this is a plano box, and I think this is the best storage for Alabama rigs that I've found so far. If you guys know of anything else out there, you know, leave me a comment in the description. I'll go check it out. But generally, I'm a flambeau guy. I'm a really big fan of their Z-Rust stuff. But this plano box is really nice in the way it stores. So the way it works is that you have these, they just slide right down in there. And then you've got some clips here in the back. You just kind of bend it down, clip it up, and it keeps Alabama rigs in there nice, secure. You can see, you can shake them around, nothing comes out. All right, so I hope you learned something from this. You may already know. If you got any tips, make sure you leave them down in the description. Share them with all of us bass geeks. We all love to learn, and we all love to talk about fishing. So as always, questions and comments in the comment section below. You know I love to talk about fishing with you guys. I love to answer your questions, and I love when you guys share your knowledge with me. Like it if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe, and you guys rock.